For this episode, I had the honor of interviewing Chuck Carroll. And for most of his life, Chuck battled a severe food addiction that almost ended his life. At just 5 feet and 6 inches tall, Chuck weighed 420 pounds and was eating 10,000 calories per day. Despite trying again and again to lose the weight, his weight kept creeping back up every single time that he tried to lose the weight, and his weight just kept increasing. Out of desperation, he decided to have weight loss surgery in 2009 at the age of 27. He was pretty sure it would just be one more failed attempt to lose weight, but when he woke up from the surgery, he never looked back. Although surgery was a critical component to kickstarting over 260 pounds of weight loss for Chuck, he only attributes 10% of his long-term weight loss success to his surgery. The rest he credits to a plant-based diet and changing his lifestyle. The confidence that he gained from his weight loss enabled him to pursue his dream of becoming a reporter, where he covered sports and news for CBS and later NBC News Radio. After deciding that he wanted to pursue a career in the world of health, Chuck partnered with Dr. Neil Barnard and the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine to launch the Exam Room podcast, which has become one of the most popular vegan podcasts in the world. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Chuck Carroll. So at your heaviest, you weighed 420 pounds and had a 66-inch waist. You thought that you would not live to see 30. You were hopelessly addicted to fast food, and you were even told that you eat too much by a Taco Bell employee. So bring us into your mind at that time. Who did you really see when you looked into the mirror?
Man, that's a deep question. Boy, who did I see when I was in the mirror? I saw somebody who wanted to really change, but was afraid that by physically changing my health, improving my health, and losing a lot of that weight would be detrimental to my career. At that time, I was working in radio, and doing stuff in radio was like a lifelong dream for me, right? So like while a lot of kids would go and they would play outside or they would watch TV after school, I was turning on the radio and listening to either sports talk radio or even just a ball game. And so I was working at radio station WBIG. Can't make this up. Big 100.3 in Washington, D.C. And I thought that I needed to be this big Chuck character in order to be on the air there. And so like, that's what I would tell myself. At least looking back, I know that that was an excuse. And certainly I think that I would have been able to work there had I not been this big Chuck guy. But yeah, I would just use every little excuse that I could find to continue down that unhealthy road. Even though when I looked in the mirror, I knew that I wanted to change. And as we get further down the road, if I didn't change, it would be the end of the line for me at a very, very early age.
So what did being 250 pounds overweight really teach you about life and about people?
Oh, man. It taught me that, and this is the sad truth, is that you are treated differently when you're overweight. I think that for a lot of us, when we are struggling with our weight, we kind of become this character, whether you're working in media or you're just working a regular 9-to-5 type of a job. A lot of times you feel like you need to be this larger than life kind of personality, the jovial Chris Farley type character. At least that's how it was for me. Everybody, I had to work just tirelessly to be everybody's friend. But, even still, because I didn't feel like I would be accepted, otherwise. And part of that also goes to, I didn't feel like I would be accepted if I wasn't Big Chuck on Big 100.3 either. But it's also the little things, man. It's like people don't really hold doors open for you. Or, there were little quips that people would make from time to time. And it didn't happen very often, but I always thought that it was so off color and so rude when it did. Like, I'd just be in a grocery store or something like that. And I remember distinctly one time this family came up and we just had a load of junk food in the cart, but somebody came up and they were like, what are you, like junk food junkies? And I was like, that's so out of bounds. Like, even though what that person was saying theoretically was correct, like, it's just like you have no idea what you're doing to this person. So I think that you're treated less than when you're overweight. And that is a sad reality. I think that that's shifting as a society right now. And that's kind of a fine line to walk. But it's just weird, man. It's just weird how you are treated differently. I don't know how to describe it unless you've been there. And if you have, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so I haven't been there, and I would love to know, what do you wish that more people knew about struggles with obesity and food addiction?
Oh, it's that it's not completely that person's fault. You know, I think that when somebody from the outside looking in, sees somebody who's struggling with their weight, they think, well, this person's lazy. They just don't like to cook. They just like fast food, and it'd be so easy for them to just start eating more fruits, more vegetables, and having a healthier diet. But it's not that easy, right? What people need to know is that there is research out there that backs up the fact that these highly palatable foods can be just as addictive as any narcotic on the market right now. You know, I'm working with Dr. Mickey Witt from the University of Miami. She's a neuroscientist. She's brilliant. And one of the things that she's taught me using actual brain scans is that the brain actually does react identically. And she showed me, she's like, okay, this is a picture of a brain, somebody who's eating a highly palatable food for the very first time. And this brain, I mean, it lights up like a Christmas tree, right? And it's the same type of reaction for somebody who's using, say, cocaine for the first time. That was what was used in this model. And then she's like, now this is a brain scan of somebody who is a food addict eating something that is highly palatable, high fat, high calorie, just a heart attack in a sack kind of fast food meal. This is what happens to the brain over time. And so that really, really illuminated area of the brain where you get that dopamine release, it was really kind of blunted, right? So you're kind of chasing the high at that point. You're never going to get that same high that you got the first time that you ate that food, but you're going to be chasing it. And then she showed me the scan of a cocaine addict, and it was exactly the same. It was exactly the same regions of the brain, exactly the same type of reaction in the brain to the same level. And so people don't think that it's a cinch to kick a cocaine habit. People know that it's hell and it's torture, and you go to rehab and you might fail many, many, many times before you finally are able to do it successfully. And it's the same thing for losing weight. And when you think about it, how many times do you hear about somebody say, well, I've tried to diet. I've gone up the scale and down the scale and up the scale and down the scale. I've tried it and I failed so many times. It's exactly the same, right? So going on a diet is like going to rehab. It's going to take a number of times before you actually get it right. And if people actually realize that it's as much up here as it is down there in the belly, then I think that there would be a lot more compassion and understanding, because it is a war that you're waging to get that stuff out of your system.
So in that war, how many times did you have to go to battle before you really triumphed? How many times did you work on losing weight before you were successful?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, just I'd run out of fingers. You know, I would absolutely run out of fingers. I was young, right? So like I was only in my 27 when I was finally able to turn things around long term, but you know, from the time that I was in elementary school, I remember being in 3rd grade, and that was the very first time that I thought about going on a diet, you know, realizing that I was over 100 pounds in the 3rd grade. I was the only person in my class who was that heavy. And so that was kind of, that planted the seed for stigma. And I was like, that's what I got to do. And then I really started to try to diet for the first time when I was in high school. I was on the wrestling team, needed to cut weight just to make heavyweight, for God's sakes. And that just wasn't happening. And then it was just like every year without fail, it was, you know, get that gym membership and go on the latest fad diet and, you know, hope that this is the time. And I was never able to sustain that long-term success, man. That roller coaster was one heck of a ride for a very long time.
So take us back into kind of a day in the life when you were going through that period of struggling with food addiction. What did your days look like, and how did kind of your life really revolve around food?
Oh man, it absolutely revolved around food. Like I was a slave to Taco Bell, man. So I actually had it in my mind where I thought that I was eating kind of a healthy diet. Like I knew that I was indulging toward the end of the day with a ton of Taco Bell, and we'll get to that in a second. But my day began with breakfast, which I skipped because I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to eat this meal so that I can save those calories. No fat, no calories here. I'm in good shape. For lunch, when I was at my absolute worst, I would go across the street. There was a Boston Market, and I would get a half of a chicken, like a whole rotisserie chicken. I get half of that, and then 3 big sides, which was usually like macaroni and cheese and mashed potatoes with gravy, which I didn't think that those were all that bad. I knew mac and cheese probably wasn't the greatest, but mashed potatoes and gravy, no problem there. And then cream spinach, right? So it's spinach that's got to be healthy. Forget about all of the cheese and the fat that they've added to it. It's spinach, so that's healthy. And then a piece of cornbread. So that was my healthy lunch. And oh, by the way, I was drinking a diet lemonade, so 0 calories. That's healthy there too. And come to find out, I mean, that was like well over 1,000 calories every single time. Anyway, going home, I was like, okay, well, doing pretty good so far. Let me stop by 7-Eleven and get a snack. And usually for people when they go to 7-Eleven, like a snack is just like one of those small bags of chips or whatever, right? Not me. I would go and I would get those things that they have on the rollers next to the hot dogs called taquitos. And I would get 6 of the buffalo chicken taquitos and 2 big bottles of Gatorade. And I thought, Gatorade, how bad could that be for me, right? Michael Jordan drinks Gatorade and I want to be like Mike. So that was my snack on the way home. When I would get home, it was pizza time. And we would get these coupons in the mail that it clearly were intended for businesses. Like if you're having a big meeting, you order 4 pizzas, we'll give you a 5th one for free. And I was like, all right, let's do this. So I would order up 5 pizzas and I would eat, 1.5, sometimes 2 entire large pizzas by myself and then save the rest for the next day. And then 4 hours after that, no matter what else I ate earlier in the day, there was some variation in that diet, but no matter what else I would eat, I would always, always, always go to Taco Bell. And if I didn't go to Taco Bell, bad stuff will happen. And I do hope that we can dive into that. That was the hardest thing in the world for me to kick was Taco Bell. So I had a standing order there. And they knew as soon as they saw my car pull into the parking lot what that order was going to be. And by the time I got to the menu at the drive-thru, they were just like, hey, Chuck, you want your usual $20, please pull through. So here's what the order was. It was 2 7-layer burritos, 2 beef grilled stuffed burritos, a chicken quesadilla, a nachos Bel Grande, a cheesy potato burrito, which was fried potatoes with nacho cheese sauce and probably grade F ground beef chili. And it was just, a sodium bomb if there ever was one. But I lived for this thing at the time. So the cheesy potato burrito, I would eat that. And because I was such a good customer, they would also give me a free caramel empanada. So when you add all of that up, right, that was more than 4,400 calories right in that ballpark, 100 and some odd grams of fat, more than 10,000 milligrams of sodium. So when you're eating that every day, no wonder I had been on high blood pressure medication since I was in middle school, right? So, as a sophomore, my blood pressure was already like 185, 190 over 100. And it terrified the doctors, so much so that I was put on blood pressure medication at that early age. So that just continued. The diet never changed. And so that's why I got up to 420 pounds, man. And if I did not eat that way, man, it was a total Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation. I was 2 entirely different people.
So you tried to stop eating like that and you just turned into this different person and that started affecting relationships. And was that part of the struggle in sticking with a diet and being successful in losing the weight?
Yeah, not so much the relationship part, although there were elements there that absolutely sucked. It's hard being a young guy that overweight and then trying to be in the dating pool as well, right? Your confidence is shot. You don't feel like you have a lot of options. Like, who's going to want to be with me at this size anyway? Like, I actually dated a girl who hid me, right? And she begged me. I mean, we were together for like a year and a half. And the entire time we were together, she said, well, look, we can't tell our friends, we can't tell our family, we can't tell anyone that we're dating. And the only reason that I could figure why was because she was ashamed to be with someone who was my size. She wasn't struggling with her weight, but she was clearly ashamed to be with somebody like me. So like that part sucked. But the biggest part though was like, if I did not go to Taco Bell specifically, again, this is why I talk about Taco Bell so much. If I did not go to Taco Bell so much, like by day 3, I would be freaking out. Like, day 1, I'd feel, I'm motivated. I'm on a diet. I'm going to be okay. Day 2, I'd start to get irritable and maybe feel a little bit sick. Day 3, I was angry. I mean, you talk about hangry. I was freaking angry to the point where I was punching my fist through walls and through doors just because I couldn't get my Taco Bell fix. And I remember one time specifically, I was actually being paid to endorse a diet on the radio. And I mean, I'm being paid to lose weight, right? Who wouldn't want to do that? And I still couldn't go without it. I was so angry. I punched the wall, punched the door, and snuck out in the middle of the night to the 24-hour drive-through just to get my fix. And that was actually the first time that I realized that I was a full-blown addict to this food, because as soon as I ate it, everything kind of calmed down. And then I was kind of sad because it was like in that instant realization that, oh my God, I'm hooked on this just like it was a drug. And what am I going to do? And it was still years after that realization that I was finally able to make lasting change. So I knew every single time I went to the drive-thru that I was killing myself, but I couldn't help it.
Wow. So you lost over 260 pounds and you saved your life by simply choosing to do so. You just made the conscious choice of changing your life. So I know you're not a fan of the word can't, but when did you decide I can't keep living this way? And when did that just really change for you?
Things got real when I was about 25. And I have a grandfather on my mother's side who had had a series of heart attacks and needed quadruple bypass surgery, right? Just a long history of heart issues. On my father's side, my grandfather died of a series of heart attacks before I was even born. I never met the man. And then my own father at this point was struggling with his heart. And so I knew that I'm just on this accelerated plan. And as much as I was tired of certain things in life, like being depressed and being hidden and just kind of feeling like shamed by life and things. And I still, despite all of that, had this just like desire to live. And I knew that if I didn't make changes, I would be dead before I was 30. And so when you're staring down the barrel of death within the matter of years, like that really puts things into perspective, right? It wasn't live like you're dying. It was like live so that you can live. And, I couldn't walk more than 10 feet without my chest beginning to tighten up at that point. Like literally, I'm in my early to mid 20s and I was about to have a heart attack at 420 pounds. Dead serious. I would have to stop, catch my breath, and then walk another 10 feet, stop, catch my breath again, wipe all of this sweat that was coming off of me. I mean, I was just sweating profusely. It was gross. Looked like I was actually just coming out of a shower. And that's no way to live, man. Like, if that was truly how life was going to be, I wouldn't want to stick around. But I also knew that change was possible. And so, yeah, simplistically, I have written and I have stated that, I just wanted to live. But it's a little bit more complex than that, because that drive to survive was really, it was a fiery one, man. I mean, I was just so ultra motivated, and there are a few other reasons that occurred, but that was it, man. I wanted to see 30, bro.
So change is really difficult, and we can often get stuck in our own heads thinking that the cost of change is too great or that we don't need to change right now. We can just push things off. For me, it was a cancer diagnosis. For you, it was facing the realization that you might not see 30. For what would you recommend to people in terms of breaking through any kind of excuses and just drawing a line in the sand if you don't have something so tangible and real staring you in the face?
Oh boy. So now that is a hard question to answer because everybody's motivation is different. And if a person isn't ready to make changes and they don't have that kind of catastrophic event occurring in their life, that horrific diagnosis or the realization that, yeah, you're going to check out if you don't change. If a person doesn't have that type of motivation and they're not ready to change themselves, I mean, I don't know what can be done, honestly, to move that needle for them. But what, I will say is that when you are ready to change, you'll know it. It's a different kind of a feeling that I had when I finally was able to break through than every other diet that I was able to go on. And so the advice that I would give somebody as they're embarking on that journey is any excuse that you have as for why you shouldn't diet or why it won't be successful, that's something that you have concocted in your own mind, right? That is a figment of your imagination. It is not real. That is an obstacle that you have put in front of yourself just so you don't have to deal with going through change. And change is difficult, man. Right? It's not a walk in the park. It can be hell and it can be torture. And so anything that we can do to postpone that, all of the effort that goes into it, a lot of times that we do. And we also tell ourselves that we can't live without these types of foods, right? Like I, at one time, was convinced I would never be able to live without Taco Bell. And I know that foods are different for everybody, but whatever the vice may be, I promise you this, you can live without it, and not just live without it. I mean, really live, thrive without it, and you're going to be just fine. So realize that all of those obstacles are just illusions. And they're really, when you think about it, something that you put there yourself so you don't have to face a difficult choice in that moment. But you also have it within you at this very second to make those changes and put in that hard work and be successful long term. Anybody who's ever done that is not Superman or Superwoman. They're just a regular person. We're all born with the same set of tools to make these radical, amazing, incredible changes in our lives that we never thought were possible. We're just ordinary people. And because you're an ordinary person too, you are also capable of making these radical, amazing, extreme, life-changing changes. Everybody can do it.
Yeah, I love that. I always look to other people, and I think if they have accomplished something that I want to accomplish, it is by definition possible. And the only thing holding me back from accomplishing that is my thoughts about what's possible for me. So just putting those aside, even though it's scary, and just moving forward is really important. And that's how I've accomplished things in my life that I didn't think were possible for me, and it's really changed my life. So I totally agree with that. You've talked about how your taste preferences have shifted from craving burritos, cheesesteaks, pizza, Taco Bell to craving kale, carrots, bananas, other plant foods. What was it like to detox from your food addiction?
It wasn't fun, man. I mean, there's so many times that, I would try to diet and it wouldn't last because the detox was so intense. So it begins with, we were talking about that irritability earlier, right? And that's the biggest one, right? You are just a raging bag of emotions, and really none of them at the time seem positive. Like, somebody would say good morning to you, and you might want to rip their head off, or somebody would say, wow, it is a beautiful day, and you're like, there's nothing beautiful about it, and bleep you and bleep your family too. Like, it was just anger and rage. So that part really kind of stinks, and that takes a while to get past because the majority of us have been eating that unhealthy diet for so many years, which means that addiction is so very strong. But you can get past that. But the other thing is, with me, the detox, I also started to feel sick physically, because there was a lot of healing that was occurring inside of me. And that means like major changes are happening with your microbiome, with literally every organ in your body that you've been gunking up now for decades. And so you're going to feel sick, like almost having the flu. And I kind of liken it to, again, going back to drawing that parallel with drug abuse, is when somebody detoxes off of that, you often see them get sick. And it's not necessarily going to be to the same extent where you're running a high fever and you're throwing up for days or anything like that. But you are going to feel like you have a really, really, really bad freaking case of the flu, or a really wicked bad cold or something like that. And you're going to have the aches. You're going to have the chills. That was my experience. And it takes a while to get past that, and then the cravings, man. I mean, even when you're past them physically, they can linger. So here I am. And in this regard, I'm not sure that you ever completely detox off of a food, because there are times when I'll be watching a game, right? And an advertisement for Pizza Hut or Taco Bell or whatever the latest and greatest at the drive-thru is, they'll pop up on the TV and I'll be like, that seems pretty good, And then it's just like, psh, like, what are you thinking? Like, no, like you can snap back to your new reality at that point. But for whatever reason, the brain is still wired to think that those things are something that your body needs. And so it's kind of funny. And that's very similar to, I used to be a smoker too. And I'll still have these fleeting cravings every now and again for a cigarette as well. And they just come out of the blue, and it's the most bizarre thing. So the detox period itself stinks. But it does get a lot easier and almost comical as the years roll by and you've got it licked. Like I do think, honestly, man, it's hysterical that those ads still kind of trigger me now, knowing full well I will never give in to them. But it's just hysterical knowing it, with everything that I've been through, everything it took to get back to this point. It's like, and I'm still craving this. Like, what are they putting in this garbage, man?
So you went into detail in describing what your diet used to look like. So what does your diet look like now, and what kind of foods are you really prioritizing?
Healthy foods. So number one, nothing but tea, water, and plant milks, and that's pretty much my drinks exclusively these days. So no more diet sodas, no more regular sodas, no more anything unhealthy, no more Gatorade. Sorry, Mike. But I'm eating breakfast now. And just like, it seems like 99% of everybody who's eating a plant-based diet will tell you the same thing. I eat oatmeal for breakfast, and then I throw a bunch of fruit in there, maybe some flax or some chia seeds in there too. So, I mean, nothing special whatsoever in the morning. But you know what the funny thing is, man? So it's like Taco Bell used to be my jam, but really my jam now is two things. It's kimchi. I freaking love just spicy kimchi, the kind that doesn't have any added sugar in it. There's a brand out there that I'm just like gaga over. Well, there's two. And I would desperately love to mention them, but for the love of Pearl, I would love to be an ambassador for them too. But anyway, kimchi is great. Roasted Brussels sprouts. Cannot go a day without roasted Brussels sprouts either. And it doesn't matter,
so
like,
good.
Oh, dude, they are, man. They're so good. And it's like, no matter what I'm eating, like it can be like a bowl of pasta, right? Which is some regular marinara sauce and, some vegetables on top of that. And I'm still going to want that side of roasted Brussels sprouts, or, it could be tofu. Give me the roasted Brussels sprouts on the side. It can be a big salad. Give me the roasted Brussels sprouts on the side. It doesn't really matter. Like, those are just, that's my thing now. I don't think that there's a Jekyll and Hyde type of situation where I would have to detox off of Brussels sprouts, but man, they are tasty. So, lunch typically is, I mean, it can either be leftovers from something that I've made here, or it could be, something as simple as a wrap, nothing real special. Dinner for me historically has been just the big old kitchen sink salad. I'm a huge fan, just out of roasted Brussels sprouts, but like really any roasted vegetable is good. So if you open up my fridge, there's always like a bunch of different things in there: roasted cauliflower, roasted red pepper, roasted Brussels sprouts, obviously, sometimes roasted carrots, like whatever the case may be. So it's just like, all right, let me get this bed of greens and I'll mix a few different kinds in there. Like, let's get some kale going, let's get some chard going. Sometimes it's spinach, and we'll like throw all of that in there on top of some quinoa, and then every roasted vegetable under the sun that I have in the refrigerator, boom, I throw that in there, and I call that the kitchen sink salad. And here's what, this sounds a little bit weird until you try it. And that is, instead of using a salad dressing that is from the store that's probably going to have more fat in it than you would like, and probably some ingredients that you really don't want to be eating anyway, what I've learned to do is just kind of take a baked sweet potato, bake it until it's ultra tender, and then put that in the salad as well. And then because it's so tender, literally just kind of like take the salad bowl, put a top on it, and shake it all up. And so what happens is that potato then kind of coats everything and becomes your dressing. And I fully admit, bro, that sounds like really kind of wacky and out of left field, but don't knock it until you try it, because it is delicious.
Yes, it is. And Brussels sprouts are definitely one of my favorites too. And I feel like they get such a bad rap when you're a kid. It's like, oh, Brussels sprouts. Like, that's the thing I shouldn't like. And I've just become really addicted to them. So I can totally understand where that's coming from.
Yeah.
So tell us about the one nacho theory and how we can apply that to our lives to become more mindful eaters.
Oh, man, am I glad you asked about the one nacho theory. This is my theory for why we are on that roller coaster of weight. It's the reason why so many of us go so wrong from the beginning. The one nacho theory is that for a certain segment of the population, you can't have just one nacho and be okay, because if you eat that one nacho, your entire diet, all of that progress just goes off the rails. So it's like this. How many people have said, okay, I'm going to lose 20 pounds, and once I do, I'm going to have this big slice of chocolate cake, right? And so like that's their big reward for losing 20 pounds. But then once they eat that chocolate cake, they have another slice and another slice, and then suddenly they start reintroducing all of the foods that they had taken out of their diet to lose that 20 pounds, and then that 20 pounds comes back and then some. And then, or it could be a case where you've lost that weight, you never had a goal of celebrating your weight loss with an unhealthy food, but you think, I've done so good, I can have just one of whatever. And so this is what happened with me. This was one of my most successful weight losses ever. I had lost somewhere in the ballpark of 65 or 70 pounds, and I was feeling great. And I was like, you know what? I can have just one nacho. I can have just one nacho. And I did. And I took that nacho and I dunked it in the nacho cheese and I ate it. And it was delicious. And then I had another nacho. And then another, and then another. And then before you know it, I'm back at the drive-thru at Taco Bell, and all of that weight came pouring back on, and I was as heavy as I had ever been in my life, and then some. So the one nacho theory is that we can't handle just one nacho. And if you think that you can, you're sadly mistaken. It's the same as celebrating sobriety by having a beer. It's the same as saying, well, I haven't had a cigarette in a year. I can have just one to celebrate this momentous occasion. And what happens when that alcoholic has that beer? What happens when that former smoker, has that one cigarette? There is a very good chance that they will be falling off the wagon as well. There will be more beers in that person's future. And that person who just had one cigarette was like, man, I miss this. I feel so good now. And then they go out and they buy a pack, and before you know it, they're smoking a pack a day again. So the one nacho theory is that food is exactly the same as those other things that we do consider to be addictive. We know are addictive. So why would then you eat that one nacho and risk derailing all of your success?
Yeah, I love that. I'd like to talk about how you balance that mindset with kind of, I guess, balance eating for health with eating for pleasure. And I know that there should be lots of overlap between both of those, and you should enjoy the Brussels sprouts. You should enjoy these other healthy plant foods. But what do you say to the person who also would like a piece of chocolate or like something else, and they use that as kind of a tool for building consistency by not just telling themselves they can't have something and then risk potentially binging at some point? So I guess I'd just like to hear you talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, man. And this is something honestly that my mindset has kind of changed slightly over the course of the last 3 years. And that is, I used to be terrified of any sort of wrap or any sort of burrito, no matter what was in it. Because I was like, that's just going to be a trigger. I mean, it could be nothing but rice and black beans wrapped up in a tortilla, and I wouldn't touch it because I was like, oh my God, this is going to send me right back to Taco Bell. It doesn't. It's different when it's a healthier version. And so the message that I put out there now is, I'm not telling you that you can't eat the foods that you've been enjoying your entire life. What I'm telling you is you can enjoy healthier versions of them. So it's not this really radical breakup with food that we think that it is. You're actually stepping into a much healthier relationship, right? A relationship that isn't toxic. So, I was a Taco Bell junkie. And just last night, I was doing an Instagram Live with my friend Dr. Will Bolsowitz, who had just published the Fiber Fueled Cookbook. And I was making sweet potato and black bean burritos as we were talking on Instagram. And they were freaking delicious. And so you can enjoy that. And if you're a chocolate fan, you can take some cacao powder and have like a heck of a chocolate shake that you've made with nothing but frozen fruits and vegetables, and you just throw a little bit of cacao in there. Boom, that satisfies the old sweet tooth. Or there's so many different ways that you can get that hit of that food that you've been enjoying your whole life. And cheese is a big one for a lot of people. And how nutritional yeast kind of mirrors the flavor of that, which can satisfy the old palate. There's just so many ways, creative ways, as that you can replicate these types of foods in a healthy manner that you've been enjoying your entire life. And that used to freak me out also on diets. Like, I remember when I would go initially, for consultation for weight loss surgery, and it was just like the people were asking, when could I have this again? When could I have that again? And it's just like, well, you probably shouldn't be having that again. But here's what you can have. That message was never relayed at that particular point. And so a lot of the people who went through, they had the weight loss surgery, they put all the weight back on just like it was another diet, so you can enjoy foods. This is the thing. You can absolutely enjoy them, but healthier versions of them.
That's a great message. So you didn't step foot into a gym at all on your path to losing over 250 pounds. You just focused on your diet and you walked miles every day, run in the sun, rain, snow. I'm a really big proponent for setting some kind of daily step goal when your goal is to lose body fat. And I think walking in general is just really underrated for fat loss. I'm sure you agree with that. But I'd love to know, how has your relationship with fitness evolved over the years?
Oh man, I was the America's least physically fit individual for a very long time, and fitness and I were just never really simpatico. We were just on two completely different wavelengths. But I thought that, this is why I never went to the gym when I was successful here finally, is because when I would try to lose weight and I would go on all of those diets previously, the first thing I would do was to go out and to get a gym membership. So over time, I began to equate the gym with failure. And so as I'm going through this radical transformation, I wanted to do everything differently, because I knew that gym membership, I'd go for, a couple of months and then I'd pay for it for another year, but never step foot inside of there, right? So that's just throwing money away. So I equated that with failure. And instead, what I did was, initially all I could do was walk across the street. And so like that's what I would do. I walked across the street and I would sit on this park bench, and sometimes they'd be playing a baseball game there. Sometimes it'd be a completely empty field. I sit there for 10 or 15 minutes and I'd walk back to my desk. And then over time, I was able to walk around the block. And then one block became two, two became three. And then it was a huge day when I was able to walk a mile for the first time in years without stopping. And I didn't want to stop. So 1 mile became two, and then three. And eventually, on my lunch break, every single day, I was walking 5 miles. And people are like, wow, man, that's a really long lunch break to walk 5 miles. And they're absolutely right, it is. But my boss and my colleagues were so inspired by the transformation that they were witnessing. My boss was like, hey, man, do your 5 miles, just make up that time at the end of the day. And guess what? That's exactly what I did. But because I also wasn't worried about going to the gym, it wasn't like I had to drag myself there after I had already worked all day and I was tired. And the last thing that I wanted to do was to go put in another hour, hour and a half in the gym, right? You don't have to do that because you've knocked it all out during your lunch break, right? And so building up that routine is huge. And so start with the small step goal. It doesn't have to be 10,000 steps, which seems to be the standard. Just look at your pedometer on your phone. If you've got a smartphone, you've had this pedometer all along. Look at that, see what your average is, and just say, okay, well, this week I want to beat it by 100 or 200 steps a day. And then increase that over time. And before you know it, you will get to that 10,000 mark or even higher. It becomes a game. You kind of compete with yourself to see how well you can do. And it's a lot of fun. And just stay motivated with it. And it doesn't matter, as you said, whether it was raining or snowing or sleeting, whatever the case may be, I was still always out there on that walk because I did not feel very good about myself when I didn't do that. And I was also worried that if I didn't do this, I would get out of this routine and then all of the weight would come back too. So that was a motivation for me as well to keep moving forward, keep walking those steps. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, physically, mentally, there's just nothing but upside to just going out and going for a walk, man. It helps you clear your head and feel good about life.
Yeah, I try to do that every single day, and I love that experience as well. Just getting out in nature is so healing and restorative, and that's something that really can ground my days, and I really enjoy that. Yeah, so do you currently have a gym membership? Are you currently kind of involved in some kind of resistance training routine, or is it really just kind of lifestyle being active?
Very much still lifestyle. I did have a gym membership briefly when I was actually doing a radio show. So fun side note is after I lost all the weight, like I got like this huge surge of confidence and kind of got to ask myself, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And remember how I had grown up listening to sports talk radio and was just like a sports nut. I founded my own sports media company, used my broadcast background for that, and I began covering the NFL. Primarily the team here in Washington, and befriended one of the players who, wound up doing a radio show with me. And, he was like, when you going to the gym, you got to tone up, you got to do this, you got to do that. It's a football player. He's been doing that his entire life. So the idea of not going to the gym was as foreign to him as going to the gym was to me. But this dude was like 6'6", 3.25, 100% muscle, right? So I'm like, I'm just going to go ahead and get this gym membership, lest I pay the consequences. So I started to go, and it was just like I expected it to be. It was kind of fun to climb on a treadmill and realize, oh my God, I can't just walk a mile. I mean, I can run a mile, and it's like no problem whatsoever. So that part was fun, but even then, it only lasted like a few months before I was like, this just isn't my jam. So I stopped going. And just like when I was using it to diet before, I kept paying on it for a year before I was like, let me just go ahead and cancel this. So that's kind of where my head's at. And I don't fight that at all. It's all lifestyle now. It's making sure you're using, it's like the little things, man. The little things make such a big difference. Take the stairs, not the elevator. Use the restroom if you're going to work on a different floor. Get up from your desk once an hour, just walk around for a hot second. Stretch those legs, get those steps. Walk as far as you can. And then, it could be something as simple as one of the ideas that I was also introduced to when I was covering the NFL was, doing some push-ups every time you would go to the restroom. Now, I'm not recommending getting on the floor of a public restroom and banging out 10 push-ups. No. What I'm saying is when you get back to your desk, go ahead and knock those out, right? So that, helps you keep a little bit of tone, a little bit of definition there. You're never going to be like this ultra strong guy like you've become, but you're going to be physically fit and you're going to have something that is sustainable for you. And that is also the key, is like finding what is something that you can build into your life that you can do every single day. And it's not taxing for you. It doesn't feel foreign. It feels natural. You can just bang it out, make that part of your routine, and stay physically fit.
Sustainability in your fitness journey is the most important piece, and you really need to find something that fits into your lifestyle, complements your lifestyle, and is something that you truly enjoy. So I would just reiterate everything you just said. It is so important to do that, whether that's resistance training for you or what you just described or whatever else that is. So you touched on the confidence that you gained from your weight loss journey and how that really enabled you to pursue your dream of becoming a reporter and covering sports and news for CBS and later NBC News Radio. How has your perspective changed about what's possible for you over your health journey?
Oh, this is my favorite part of it. It's not the weight loss. It's just like, it's everything that comes with it, and realizing, just everything that you are capable of doing. It goes back to those obstacles we were talking about earlier in the show, right? The same obstacles, the same excuses that you would have for why you can't successfully diet. We put similar obstacles in our way as for why we can't achieve certain career goals. And I'm not saying everybody's going to be, like Bill Gates, ultra rich. That's just not possible. But you can be extremely happy in your career doing exactly what it is that you've always wanted to do. You don't have to be stuck in your ways, man. So this confidence because once you learn that you can do something, lose weight, keep it off, that you thought was impossible, right? So now that you know that the impossible is in fact possible, well, okay, what else do I have in my life that's impossible that I've always wanted to accomplish? And for me, that was the career, and getting unstuck in that kind of mindset and going on and becoming a reporter, man. So it's just like, again, it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to do this. Okay, go do it. I don't care if you're 50, 60, 70 years old, like close to retirement. Why not spend those last couple of years in the workforce working on something that you love to do? You absolutely can do that. And you're kidding yourself if you tell yourself that it's not possible, right? So start turning that, is not possible into is possible, and magic can happen.
That's been the number one thing that I've gotten out of my fitness journey, my health and fitness journey, is confidence. And not just confidence when I look in the mirror, but the confidence to pursue a career that is truly meaningful to me. The confidence to put myself out there and build relationships. The confidence to do things that I used to not think were possible for me. And I still have lots of trepidation around taking that initial step, but I just decide, hey, I'm going to do this in the face of that fear. And that has forever changed my life. So I like to say that fitness is a catalyst for life transformation, because I have seen firsthand what building that self-confidence can really contribute to your life. And I couldn't agree more. So how has your why really evolved over your health and fitness journey? When you were first getting started, you just said, hey, I want to live to see 30. But how has it evolved over time, and what has that been like for you?
So it's not just me anymore. My wife and I don't have kids. So for a lot of people, their why is their family and their children, because they want to be around to see them grow. And then the next generation after that, they want to be there. My wife and I don't have kids, don't plan on having kids. That's not the why. For me, my motivation, kind of like, if you want to use those terms, my ultimate motivation, my kids are the people who have become inspired by my story, or heard about it, or listened to the Exam Room podcast and have overhauled their health, transformed in ways that they never thought were possible before. And to get emails from them, that say, hey, I had diabetes, I've lost 50 pounds, it's gone now. I didn't think that was possible. And I heard about it first on your show. Thank you so much. It's so inspiring. Or, Chuck, like you, I was 300 pounds overweight and I've lost 200 of it. I still have 100 to go, man, but I know that it's possible because, I came across your story. Thank you, And so it's not about boosting an ego like, yeah, I did all this and now people are following suit because of me. No, it's people are following suit and they're learning that it's possible, right? And so while it may have been my particular story that got them going, now it's going to be their story that's going to get another person going, right? And so when there are so many millions of people out there right now who are exactly where I used to be, my why is to reach those people, whether it's because they see my story or it's they saw somebody else's story who may have learned about it, from wherever, and they make these changes too. The why is proving to or helping other people prove to themselves that they are, in fact, capable of doing the impossible. And so just that gratitude that I receive from people who have had these incredible transformations means more than any paycheck ever will, because I know that feeling and I know how sweet that feeling is. And it opens your eyes to a whole other life, and that's when it becomes life 2.0. I love that. The why is helping people reach life 2.0.
I love that. Yeah, there's no greater feeling than watching our clients experience those same kind of results. And that is why I do what I do, to help other people go through that, a similar experience. And our mission is to help 1 million vegans get into the best shape of their lives. And that's because I firmly believe that the more healthy and fit vegans there are in the world, the bigger that ripple effect will be that you talked about. So the more animals will help, the more people will save in terms of their health and give them more quality years of life and more confidence to live life on their terms. I think that ripple effect is so powerful, and that's clearly what you're pushing forward in your work as well. So I think that's just incredible. I'm a really big proponent of following your passion, and I'd love to know, how has following your passion really guided your life and resulted in the creation of the Exam Room podcast?
Man, it's boy, that's a loaded question. It's made my life just so much more rich. Those obstacles are no longer there. And, it really did guide me right to the Exam Room podcast because, after I, transitioned, CBS wanted me to transition from sports over to news. And I did that. But when you're covering the news, and it was a lot of fun, man. I mean, I saw things firsthand that, you only see about when you're scrolling through your phone or you see it on the news, and it was a real privilege to be able to see these things, man. But so much of the news that gets reported is negative stuff. It's houses that have burned down. People have lost everything, or worse yet, murders. People have lost a loved one. Families are literally torn apart, and when you're covering that type of news day in and day out, it begins to take a toll on you mentally. And so even though with your physical health, you may be thriving at this point, as I was, but when you're around negativity all day, it's still toll. It's still taxing. There's an enormous toll. And so I knew that I still loved broadcasting, but I wanted to do something healthier. So I was like, well, I know about this group, the Physicians Committee, and I'd done something with them in the past. Let me approach them about doing this show. And it only took, like 3 meetings, and then we had a done deal to create the first episode of the Exam Room, and it's just blown up into one of the biggest nutrition podcasts on the entire planet, which is so cool. And so it's just like, again, taking those obstacles out of your way and then knowing that you can do whatever it is that you set your mind to do, man. It is such a good feeling, and it is so sweet. And honestly, man, I have never, ever, ever, ever been happier than I am today, And so I did that by taking charge of my health. And then subsequently, the confidence has enabled me to follow my passions. And I have no plans on slowing down. If anything, I'm just going to accelerate and keep expanding and doing other things that can help other people. And nothing is going to make me happier than to see more people succeed and experience the same type of transformations you and I have had.
I love that. So you touched on the fact that you were initially, your why was, hey, I want to see 30. Was that driven by a fear of death, or was that driven more so by a fear of, hey, there's more that I feel like I need to contribute in this lifetime? Or was it a combination of both of those?
So it was definitely a fear of death, man. I'm not going to lie to you. You know, I'd like to be as honest as I can, because truth is always easier than lies, man. So yeah, I am scared to death of dying to this day, right? Because I'm enjoying life so much at this point. I really, I want to be around for as long as I possibly can. So that was an enormous motivating factor. But yeah, you know, even at that age, you know, I knew that there was still so much more that I wanted to do with my life. And so that definitely played a part in it as well. But death was primarily the motivating factor, because if I didn't, you know, if I wasn't able to escape that one, man, how could I possibly go on to do anything else, right? That's the end of the road. So when you're facing that, I mean, that it doesn't get, you know, much more motivating than that. But the funny thing is, though, man, even with death being the motivating factor, it still was a number of years before I was able to make changes, you know, that brought me to this point. You know, it's going back to food addiction. It just shows how powerful of a hold food can have on us.
Yeah. I think it was Steve Jobs who said that death is the single greatest invention of life. I believe it was him who said that, and it's kind of along the lines of, hey, this it gives you a reason to live. It gives you a reason to have kind of a deadline on what you can contribute to the world, and it just pushes you to actually live life now instead of pushing it off. So what advice would you give to someone who experiences anxiety around food after they've lost weight?
Okay, this is a good one. It's that one, don't fight that anxiety, right? Because if you fight it, it makes the situation a whole lot worse. So if you know that food is going to make you anxious, rethink that anxiety. Which you're like, well, what exactly does that mean? I call it suck, right? It just sucks at that moment, right? So maybe you're anxious, you're having like this intense craving for the food, and your life just absolutely sucks at the moment because all you can focus on is getting that food, right? But somehow that situation, that 10, that 15 minutes, whatever the case may be, while you're having this intense craving is occurring, just accepting the fact that you're going to be uncomfortable for that time makes it a little bit easier. Because at that point, you know that you will get past it. You know, it's a fleeting thing. And if you're anxious because there's all of this food around that you really don't want to eat, and you're in a social situation and you feel like people are pressuring you to eat it, it's cool. Accept the suck for that time as well. And you're going to be fine. You're going to be uncomfortable, but you're also going to be fine. And so just as I say, accept the suck. And so it just becomes easier. It just does. You know, it's funny, like you give yourself permission to be uncomfortable as opposed to trying to swim upstream and like beating yourself up for having these feelings about something as, you know, wacky as food. There, you know, you are who you are. You crave what you crave. You know, don't beat yourself up over these feelings. They're perfectly natural, for goodness sakes. Accept them, embrace them. Doesn't mean give in to them, but understand that that's just a part of who you are. But also understand that you already have the tools to get past it. Just to give yourself permission to be uncomfortable for a little while, and you're going to be okay.
I think what you said earlier in finding healthy alternatives to some kind of any kind of cravings that you have, I think that's a important part of that process and kind of transitioning to a healthier lifestyle. So love that. You've had the pleasure of speaking with many amazing guests on the Exam Room podcast. What have been some of your biggest takeaways from the conversations you've had?
Bro, man, have my eyes been open to so many things. It's that you hear about these sky high rates of chronic diseases, right? And I had no idea that any of that stuff was preventable or even reversible in a lot of cases, right? I didn't know that you could reverse diabetes, but I've talked to people who have gone blind, damn near had to have amputations because their blood sugar was raging so out of control. They changed the way they ate, they changed the way they lived, and guess what? The diabetes reversed. They can see again. They don't need an amputation. Why? Because that leg, that foot is working just fine. People who have, gone into remission from cancer, told, well, okay, there's a high probability that this thing is going to come back. But then 10, 15, 20 years later, it hasn't come back. Why? Because they've changed the way that they've eaten. Heart disease, had heart disease, like damn near like just ridiculous blockages, should have had a heart attack. Change the way that you eat, go back in. Guess what? Heart disease is gone. I didn't know any of that was possible, man. And so just knowing that is just so empowering because it teaches you, man, that you have more control over your future than you realize, right? Alzheimer's is the big one for me. That's another part of my why that we haven't gotten into, is because it runs so rampant in my family. And I, was convinced that I was going to have it, but now I know the foods not to eat. I know what to eat to prevent it. And I know that, for a large number of these cases, they are 100% preventable. I remember speaking to Dean and Aisha Shirzai about this and just feeling a sense of comfort during that interview. I mean, you could probably even see it on my face as they're explaining this to me for the first time. I was like, holy crap. This is so much more than just weight loss. Like, you really can take control of your health, your whole health. I mean, every freaking aspect of it, you have so much more control over than you could possibly realize. And that too, man, that is just the coolest feeling in the world, man.
Yeah, that really is the coolest feeling. And I love just seeing people understand that they have control over their health and fitness journey and building the self-confidence that they can continue doing this for life, and they find some kind of long-term sustainable approach that works really well for them. That's just absolutely life-changing. And I also, as I was going through my cancer diagnosis, I didn't have any history of cancer in my family. But even at that time, I was feeling like genes are your destiny. Whatever you are, whatever kinds of diseases you're experiencing, that's out of your control. And it wasn't until I started diving into the research and realized actually only a small percentage of these long-term health conditions, like Alzheimer's, like cancer, like heart disease, can be attributed in some way to genetics. And the vast majority is just lifestyle factors that go into that. And that was so empowering, as you touched on. It was such an empowering idea that just completely changed my life. And it's really amazing to see people make that realization as well.
Yeah, man. I love that. I love hearing from people who have had that epiphany. Because as we were saying, man, that's sweeter than any paycheck in the world could ever possibly be. There's no amount of money that can match that. And yeah, man, God, I could talk about that all day too, man. That just makes me feel good, dude.
Yeah, love that. So last question that I wanted to talk about a little bit was how people's perceptions of you, family, friends, other people, how that's really changed of like their perceptions of you over this transformation, this amazing transformation that you've experienced.
I don't know. The man. Okay, you may have stumped me, dude. Immediately, I don't know. I mean, I would think that it's just like, okay, Chuck's gonna be okay. I didn't think that he was gonna be able to lick those food demons, but he did. Yeah, man. The public perception, as we were talking about a little bit earlier in the show, is certainly a lot different. People are a little bit more warm and inviting. They're not coming up to you and saying, well, look at what's in your shopping cart, you junk food junkie. No wonder you're so fat. You don't get that anymore. So there's less stigma with it, and there should never be that kind of stigma, by the way, ever. That's not okay whatsoever. But I think that, the perception is, look, man, if this guy was able to do it, then I can do it too. And I hope that there are people who are close to me who probably haven't said anything. They may be a little vegan skeptical or whatever the case may be, but I guarantee they're keeping a close eye, and they're wondering, well, could this help me? And I guarantee it could. So, I mean, yeah, I don't really know, dude. You have asked me the first question in a very long time that I don't have a very good answer for, man. I don't know.
Gotta
you
keep
would
you on
have to
your toes.
ask. Yeah, dude, that's a credit to you. You would have to ask other people, how their perception of me has changed. I haven't asked them. That is a good question, man. My hat is off to you.
Yeah, thanks. So you touched on veganism just there, and I'd like to talk a little bit about your views on kind of plant-based versus veganism and how you kind of use those terms and what they mean to you. I know that you're the host of a very popular nutrition podcast that's very science-based. So I know the term plant-based is kind of used more in that circle. But you also just touched on veganism. So yeah, how do you view those terms and what do they mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, it is very interesting. Plant-based is, just by definition, plant-based is a way of eating, and vegan is a lifestyle, right? And so there are people who use it interchangeably, and then there's also, a segment of the population where it's like, no, if you don't drive a car that doesn't have any leather in it whatsoever, you can't have a leather belt, no leather boots, anything like that. Anything animal related has to be 100% out of your life in order to be vegan. That's that. And that is sadly, a really hard thing to live up to in this day and age. I mean, it's hard to come into contact with something that hasn't, been a derivative somehow from an animal at some point in your day. It just is, and it sucks. You try to avoid it as much as you can, but plant-based is more nutrition focused for me. So when I think about the two, that's kind of my delineation is lifestyle versus diet exclusively. So that's kind of my separation. And plant-based, I think, there's also not that stigma that is still associated with the V word for a lot of people. People hear vegan, and if they're not interested in giving up meat or dairy, boy, that elicits a reaction, because I can only imagine how I would have felt at 420 pounds if somebody was said, hey, Chuck, you should go vegan. I'd be like, the hell I should? Like, get out of here with that. Like, so it's just getting past that stigma, and you realize that there's no need for it once you do embrace the idea of eating a plant-based diet. But yeah, plant-based is nutrition, vegan is a lifestyle. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, me too. And I initially went plant-based for my health, and then I watched Earthlings, and that really kind of opened my eyes. So did you have a similar realization in watching some kind of animal cruelty, or just getting exposed to that industry that kind of opened your eyes into veganism after going plant-based?
Yeah, I think it's hard not to get your eyes open for that. People go vegan for three reasons, right? Primarily, more often than not, it's going to be for their own health, right? But then there's also the environmental aspect of it, and then the animal aspect of it. So that's your holy trinity of veganism right there. But I guess back in the day, I just always thought, well, man is at the top of the food chain, so it doesn't really matter how these animals are treated. And I didn't really give much thought to that, right? I just thought that this was just natural order of things. But then to see some of these documentaries that you've been talking about, and witnessing what these animals actually go through, like, it's hard not to have compassion for that, right? It's hard not to think like, that's just not right. Like, and just kind of feel sick by what it is that you're seeing, these atrocities, and whether it's, slaughter for food or experiments that are being conducted in labs, like all of that is just completely unnecessary, and it's heartbreaking. And so, you know, when, you know, people tell me that they're kind of flexitarian, you know, and they'll still drink milk, or they'll still eat, you know, a hamburger, you know, every now and again. You know, for me, like, I can't do that. You know, I'm not going to judge that person and vilify them and tell them that they're going to hell when they die. I'm not going to do any of that, right? But I do immediately think about, you know, where that milk came from, where that hamburger came from, what that animal went through just so they could have that. And so the way that I see it is, just for me to have 5 minutes of enjoyment, that animal have to go through all of that and lose its life. That's pretty daggone selfish, man. You know, so I don't consider myself to be an activist per se, but if you ask me my opinion, I'm going to tell you exactly what it is that I just told you. You know, it's like somebody went through hell and torture for you to have what it is that you're having right now. And do you think that it would be fair if the shoe were on the other foot and that person was you, right? You wouldn't say, like, I'm going to give up my life so somebody can enjoy me for 5 minutes. Like, no way. No freaking way. So why is it any different for animals? I don't know.
Yeah, it's the golden rule, and that's something you're taught as a kid, but it doesn't. It applies to other humans until you kind of make that kind of mental transition and understand really what these animals are going through, and that's totally changed my perception on all of it. So yeah, it's amazing that that following a plant-based, mostly whole food, plant-based diet is so beneficial to your health and to the planet and to the animals. I just love that this eating approach benefits everyone and our world at large, and that's a huge blessing to be able to pursue a way of eating that's aligned with your best interests and the best interests of animals and the planet. So, Chuck, I really appreciate all of your transparency today. Thank you so much for your time. This has been an awesome conversation. How can our audience best support your work? Where can they go? How can we support you?
Oh man, you do me a huge favor if you haven't already subscribed to the Exam Room podcast. Please, you know, you're probably listening to this right now, so hop on Apple Pod and just search for the Exam Room by the Physicians Committee and subscribe to that there, and then leave a 5-star review or a 5-star rating if you would be so kind as well, because that really does not just help out the show, but it helps get that show and that information out there to people who need it the most, when they need it the most. So if you could do that, that would be fantastic. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter at Chuck Carroll WLC, and then Facebook as well. You know, just search for me, and there I will be.
Yeah, awesome. And we didn't touch on kind of your nickname, but that's where the WLC comes from. So you are known as a weight loss champion, and that's actually referencing that NFL player you were talking about earlier. He was actually the one who kind of gave you that nickname and kind of forced you to adopt it.
He did, man. Like, I was uncomfortable with it at first, and because, you know, during this radio show, we would give out a championship belt to the player of the week on the team, you know, who was the MVP, and just one day out of the blue, he's like, you know what, you're the weight loss champion. You're the weight loss champion. And I was like, if you say so, and I didn't think anything of it. And then the next show, when I didn't introduce myself as the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, he stopped me right then and there. He's like, why didn't you call yourself the weight loss champion? I was like, I don't know. It's kind of braggadocious. He's like, it's not bragging if it's a fact. Dude, you lost almost 300 pounds. You are the weight loss champion. And so when somebody who's that large and has that big a muscle is telling you, like, this is the way that it is, that's the way that it is. But you know what I also thought? I was like, this is a guy who is ultra successful, has accomplished his dreams. He knows clearly what he's talking about. And it's that kind of mentality of truly embracing who you are and embracing your success and realizing that, yeah, you can embrace it without being just this egotistical, arrogant jerk, because that really was my primary concern with that nickname. Is I didn't want anybody to think that I was talking down to them or I was elite. You know, that's not the case. It was just like, it's just a way of celebrating the success that I've had. And so eventually I got comfortable with it and I've embraced it. And it's just a little bit of a reminder of how far I've come.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, so please go ahead, follow Chuck, follow the Exam Room Podcast, subscribe to the Exam Room Podcast, leave that 5-star review to help other people discover the amazing work that Chuck is doing. And Chuck, again, I just want to thank you for your time. This has been awesome.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.